Hello again, here's Conscious TV and Renate McNay. I just finished the program with Georgi Y Johnson, and in her interview she talked about a phase of incredible suffering, panic attacks and anxiety and depression. And we thought we make another program on depression and anxiety in spiritual awakening, and we interviewed into this, we invited into this program her partner Bart Ten Berge, who helped her in this process of finding herself again. So maybe we start, Georgi, by you telling us briefly again what happened to you, how you fell into this depression and how you were searching for help as you were diagnosed very wrongly by the medical profession, and how you found Bart in Holland. Yeah.
So, in a way, we're all born kind of awakened, enlightened, free, natural beings. And we're born into this world and into this family and into this culture. And stuff happens. So one of the things that happened to me as a child is that my father suddenly died when I was 14. He was a record producer and an alcoholic, and he basically died from self-neglect. There was already a divorce, and so I didn't witness it. So this was a tremendous shock to the system that, physically at least, there is this thing, we're mortal, we die. It's this horror, this death, and it led into this whole period of anxious, depressed, despairing, soul-searching around mortality and crucifixions and what's dead and where is he and what had happened. Now, as a teenager, as a child, when you lose a parent, it's very hard to process it because you're not really fully formed yet. You know, you don't know they're not going to be there when you get married, they're not going to be there to see your children. You don't know any of this, so a lot of it can't really be felt yet because not everything in terms of personality is mastered yet. There's too much vulnerability. So it became a kind of part of identity, that it made me special, that I lost my father. It was like this secret tragedy, this traumas that make us proud. And it stayed like that. And like I said before in the previous interview, I went into this whole investigative journalist thing and being kind of a wowie kind of person, achieving stuff, saving the world, but all on the basis of a false ego structure. Because I never felt the feelings of loss. I never felt the feelings of despair, the natural human grieving that I lost my daddy. It all had become this kind of spiritual, on the one hand a spiritual abstract thing, and on the other hand a story which I would tell. And I would tell because it made me special. So it was a kind of egoic story that I told people when they would let them come close, which made me more special than them, in a way. Which made me distinguished, deep. But the feelings stayed contracted. The grief just stayed unfelt. And as time went by, you know, and I had children of my own, and this feeling of shock of mortality and loss to connected with parenthood was still there. It became unsustainable to hold the contraction, because how can I connect to my children when I could die like this? I'm lying to myself if I think that I can be a stable parent, if I think that that this disaster isn't going to repeat on them. This is the kind of natural way of thinking in terms of energy when things are not above the threshold of consciousness. But at the same time, when I started to have anxiety as a young mother, nobody related to the grief that was there from 15 years ago to that story, and I would tell it in a monotonal voice. My father died, ha ha ha, even laugh about it. Nobody recognized that this was blocked energy.
But were the seeds of the anxiety tangible beforehand? That's what I mean by that. Did you have periods of some kind of anxiety before you had your own children?
No.
Yeah, none at all. There was no traces.
No, it really came with the first. You know, I was pregnant with my first child. I didn't even know I was pregnant, and I got on a plane to fly from New York to Boston, and I was totally terrified suddenly of flying. This thing of carrying the next generation already chemically set in a whole new survival response as an adult. Before that, I realized what I used to do when I got on a plane was surrender to imminent death, and I was at peace with that. And when you have a child, it's not so easy anymore.
But on the other hand,
so I wasn't afraid.
If you're saying you surrender to immediate death, there's still the thought process there that you might die.
Yes.
It's still tangible at that level, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But it's still manageable.
It's manageable.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything that happened in terms of anxiety beforehand was easily manageable by you?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so after this whole period of anxiety and depression, I went to a first session. I went to a healing to study the spiritual psychology education with Bart. And after a few years, we had a session, the first therapeutic meeting. And he heard the story of my father's death and what I'd witnessed. And it was as if when he was listening, it was totally alive now. It wasn't an old story. It wasn't old, been there, done that, why are you still crying about it? It happened 15 years ago. And he talked directly to it. He named the grief. And he explained how I'd been left with this sense that I was supposed to save my father. This is how it went, the trauma in a way, that I was supposed to save him from dying. I was, he asked me to write him a letter the last time I saw him, which would help him give up smoking and give up drinking. He didn't know he was going to die, but the next thing was that he died. And I couldn't bring myself to write that letter, and I kind of instead made a poster of the Irish blessing. May the wind be at your back, may the sun shine always on your face, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. So from somewhere deep down, in a way, rather than saving him, I said goodbye. And then he died, suddenly, of pneumonia. So this was carried for 15 years. And Bart was able and awake enough and alive enough in living connection to send me straight off with the homework. You go now and you write a letter to him as an adult. Doesn't matter that he's dead for 15 years. And you tell him why, as a 14-year-old, you tell him how much you love him, and you tell him why you're not able to save his life. And you tell him how you feel. And then you burn the letter in a ceremony and see what happens next. This, for me, was an incredible closure of 35 years. I mean, no, because I was 14 when it happened, of 20 years of holding and searching for him. Searching for him out there, on the other side, not in here. So that was an enormous help in releasing what is really, was for me a blocked heart, a blocked awareness, keeping me constantly in survival through the mind. In some ways, awakening looks like a state of emergency. If the sirens go off now in London and we're under attack from North Korea, we are all going to be so awakened, right?
You think North Korea is going to attack us?
So what happened? Yeah, maybe Bart, you can tell us your side, how you perceived Georgi, and in your experience, you worked a lot with bipolar people and depression and...
When I look to my own process and the awakenings I went through, often what happened is that I came into a position with myself in my life. I was so desperate, sometimes by fear, sometimes by loneliness, sometimes because there was a problem and there was no way to get out of the problem. I got so desperate that in a way you give up. You let go of all the ideas, all the fixing which needs to be outside, all the pain, even of the pain, even of the fear, because if fear becomes unbearable, then at a certain moment you can give up on the fear. You know, it's not under your control anymore. You give up on the fear for the fear. And then something magical happens. In a way, what happens is that there is a kind of a distance between you and the fear, and the fear is not gone, and it's very uncomfortable. But our bodies are in fear most of the time. Most of us don't notice this. Basically what's happening, it's filtered out, like the heartbeat in our ears. But sometimes there is a situation in which our nerve system is not filtering out this fear. And that means that we're suffering fear, and especially when we relax ourselves, we're suffering fear. It's like tinnitus in the ear, the sound, the fear is there on the background all the time.
And what is this fear about? Is this a fundamental fear?
It's the fear of life itself.
Of
it's life.
Survival.
Life. We don't even need to name it.
Yeah.
It's the fear which comes together with creation. What's important to understand is, as I understand how our physical is working, fear is part of creation, is a drive on another level, as much love and care is a drive. It's connected with separation, the trauma of separation, the separation of the sexes, the separation of heaven and earth. This is fearful. This is traumatic in a way. Every separation is painful, traumatic, and produces its own fear. So there is an amount of fear which, if you open up, you feel it in dread over every city. The amount of social dread in the world is unbelievable. And we all suffer it, but normally we block it and we are able to filter it out. And sometimes you come in a period in your life where you're not able to filter this out anymore.
So what actually blocks it? How does that process work?
It's like in the nerve system, automatically, we block a lot of information because it's all the time there. It's part of what's all the time there, like the heartbeat in our ears. So normally we don't hear it, we block it. Sometimes when fear is very uncomfortable, what we do is that we kind of keep a finger on it. Especially when there is a fear for the fear, which means that fear can flare up suddenly, and this is so uncomfortable that we kind of keep a finger on the fear in order to control that it will not flare up, especially when we suffered fear very deeply. So,
and is that something we shouldn't do? To put the finger on it?
happens. It's not something you could do or not do. It becomes part of how you function as of the person as you are. It's not right or wrong. It's part of the suffering which is there. And what I try to tell is the same as depression. If it really, really, really becomes very, very, very bad, we start to unlearn. We start to let go of a lot of things. All the things outside ourselves, we can let go of. Because if the fear or the depression is very bad, it doesn't fulfill anymore. There's nothing there. If you tried for 200 times another plan to make life better, to go into happiness, and every time, it falls down and you come back to the same depression, to the same fears, you try to solve it in 1,000,000 times, it doesn't work. It brings you back. So the art is not in a way to solve it, but the art is to move a little bit more deeply into it, all the way. And so in listening to the story of Georgie, what I heard in what she was bringing forward is a pain on the background, which was a whole self-defense, a whole defense towards life was built on. And it was part of her identity. And an identity we hold on as what we think we are is pure survival. It's a limitation. So, in a way, what I try to do is to give her a tool to really, really move to the depth of the experience, which she didn't do. And that was kind of until then.
Yeah.
And is it not possible, if you really go deeper into this fear, that the nervous system blows up or goes on overload?
No. There is something so beautiful about our biology, is that at a certain moment, when we go deep enough into fear, deep enough into depression, a numbness will come forward. The body will kind of at a certain moment will protect itself by shutting it down. It is sometimes what is needed is the willingness to die in the depression. Okay, that's it then. You give up. The willingness to die in the fear. That's it then. I give up. I let go all the control.
Give up control, yes.
And this giving up of control is giving the freedom to the physical body in a way to restore itself from an imbalance which is there somewhere.
You see, there's the Peter Levine books, which I've read, you're probably aware of, where trauma is stored in the cells in the body.
Yeah.
And the theory there is very much that we have the traumas, we hold the traumas in our body, and really what should happen is after a shock, whether it be a physical shock or emotional shock or a mental shock, the body should shake.
Yeah.
And this is what animals do apparently in the wild. They may be like a small animal is caught by a tiger or a lion or something, and then he managed to escape. Afterwards, he'll shake his body to release the trauma, and then he's okay again.
Yeah.
And so, is that something that you also would bring into your work? That if you saw it was a trauma, you'd physically encourage the person to shake off the trauma? Is it as simple as that, or?
It is as simple as that, if you can reach that level. But there is something with humans which is different from animals, and that's our imagination. And you know, even sometimes if we release a fear, we can imagine it coming back. We imagine, we can build a whole world around fear or around depression, loneliness, whatever is the background for depression, that it will come back. This imagination, kind of in this we recreate it, because sometimes, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but sometimes when you're free of it and it would come back, is more unbearable for the mind as enjoy when it's not there for some moments, because it coming back would destroy everything again. And that's connected with the mind, with the conditions we place in our mind. But that's a different situation, as that there is a fear always there, which the nerve system doesn't filter out for whatever reason. This is something else.
Sorry, I just want to mention something interesting. I interviewed somebody some time ago, and he said, one is enlightened, whose nervous system is no longer be thrown by a chemical storm outside. Would you agree with that?
No, not at all. First thing is, enlightenment is such a difficult thing, and so many people, it's like love or sex. When people talk about love or sex, you know, there's so many different stories, levels of what is enlightenment or not.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about freedom. A person is free when he is able to let the storm move through himself or herself without believing that he is the storm or is formed by the storm. It's a storm.
Yeah.
It's a form coming through. It's not defining you. And I think that's freedom, because otherwise there's always a separation between you and the reactivity of the body. Bodies react to the environment. They always react to each other. We react to each other.
We are so much more one than many non-dualists would ever dare imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if we move into a room full of angry people, the anger is resolved,
Anger
is
will
through the water molecules in our cells,
Yeah.
it is resounding just
Yeah.
as much as the most angry person in the room.
Yeah.
Whether or not we think we're enlightened, it's moving through us.
You see, there's a lot of people talk, and we've had them on Conscious TV, about this dark night of the soul,
Yeah.
where they go on, let's say they go on the journey, the spiritual journey, and they have realizations and enlightenment experiences, satori experiences, and then comes this time, and sometimes it will be defined as, like with you, you said earlier, the ego shell. I think you said the ego shell, something like that. Where,
Apocalypse of ego.
yes, where they get to the edge of something, and because their perception, their world, how they see reality, is possibly going to dissolve as they see it, it brings about incredible fear, normally more than depression, I think, but fear, because it is their world, as they've known it, is about to dissolve.
Yeah.
And I remember interviewing Claudio Narango a few years ago, and I think his dark night of the soul lasted 17 years. This can last a long, long time in people. And it's not as if these are people that don't have access to tools in terms of different ways of looking at it. It just seems to take its time with certain people. So, and there seems to be other people that find their freedom in their own way and what they see as freedom in a comparatively easy way. And it always interests me how in certain people there's this dark night of the soul that can be apparently at the time almost endless, and other people, things open, it seems to be a relatively easy process.
Yeah. The first thing is the definition of the dark night of the soul. If I, in my experience, the real dark night of the soul is after enlightenment. Of course, you know, when we have this experience of enlightenment, there's this experience of oneness with God, or oneness with awareness, this expanded awareness, this incredible love which is reflected back from everything which is around yourself. And we really love to hold on to this, and you can hold on to this for a very long time, but it's also a kind of dreamy state, and it's still dual, because we are in this position, and this is separating us from the rest of the world who is not in this position. It's dual. It's still me, the enlightened one, and the others. The suffering is part of this world. And the dark night of the soul, how I understand it, I'm not saying this is it, but how I understand it, is connected with really moving to the depth of suffering. Moving to such a deep suffering that you lose your fear of suffering, and this is the liberation. And sometimes this takes a short time, and sometimes it takes a very long time, but it's a deeper liberation as only enlightenment. There's a little bit before enlightenment, but after enlightenment comes the deeper liberation, that the source of the deepest suffering, which is there is the split between male and female. which is the pure start of creation. And this is also where polarity, duality starts. So the darkness of the soul can bring you into this basic first suffering until we are able to let go of the fear, and then we understand that the same fear which is there for suffering is the fear which is withholding us to move into unity. Because if there is unity, there cannot be unity when there is not unity in suffering as well. There is not a real unity when there's only unity in love or unity in joy.
But when you have unity,
Yeah.
you're also united with the suffering that exists, so you never get away from it.
Exactly. So there is no unity without suffering.
Yeah.
Which means, if you look to it, unity is already there. It's always there. We kind of contract from the unity, but it's there. So it's letting go of a contraction. And some people are more able to let go of this contraction as other people. So that means that part of the also collective suffering is moving through people in a way. And this is a lot of people who is moving through, they don't understand where their fears, their depression, their anxiety is coming from. There's even sometimes not a real reason, and sometimes it's stronger and sometimes it's less. So to solve it, to work with these people, to solve it is not kind of to learn them, to shield them more, to contract more. That doesn't work because there is a leak. It's not in the contraction, but it's in letting go of the contraction. It's absolutely the opposite in a way. That's the best way I can explain it. But we always are looking in the defense, in the contraction, and not in the kind of the surrender, okay, this is how it is for me. In the expansion.
And how are you with the fear now these days, Georgie?
This is one of the reasons that I so much go on doing what I'm doing now, is that you see the remarkable freedom in form and release of old patterns. For example, I used to be very much a freeze and flight person, the run for China person and the freeze person in conflict situations and situations of anger. And now I notice that I can not only shout at somebody and argue in Israel, which is a tough place, I don't get excited. So not only have I lost the fear of anger, I've lost the identification with anger, and this fear and anger can move through me very quickly, and I'm still calm. I'm not, palpitating. I don't need to justify it in my head, but after that, it's kind of, oh, I didn't even get moved, and I just screamed at somebody and stood for myself. 10 years ago, I would have been gone. And gone physically, run for China, and once in China, I would have been going over it again and again in my head of why I was right, why I'm okay,
So does that mean you cannot be hooked anymore? There is nothing in you which resonates anymore. It's just flowing through.
I can for sure get hooked, but what's different now? Because there's nothing wrong with getting hooked.
Yeah.
It's knowing how to let go. So I can get entangled completely, and then I can let it go and create space within it, and even be curious about it, even enjoy it. Enjoy the momentary whammo. It's almost part of the joy of being here with all its colors, with the pleasure and the pain, with the anger and the silence, with the whole truthful expression of life in the moment. It's not frightening anymore, and that's the main thing. It's exciting but not frightening.
So what you're saying is it's not frightening on the personal level. Fear might be felt, because you are expressing the divine, the oneness, whatever we call it, but it's not caught in your own historical, personal associations and history with fear.
Well, it is as well. I still, when I fly in a plane and the plane goes, there is these kind of layers of fear, and I kind of sit there and there's this incredible space around it, and the fear is still there, but it's absolutely okay. So there's really a difference, whereas before it would have been already like a contraction within, the fear would come forward, which is a natural thing. If you're 2 kilometers above the earth and the plane you feel is about to crash, it's not that natural to fly. Yeah, so the fear is natural and it is personal. It's about this body going down.
Yeah, but how do you know it's not, that doesn't include the fear of the other people in the plane? Do you have?
Well, they look calmer than me.
But you're absolutely right.
Yes.
It's feeding each other. Flying is for people a frightening thing, and when you're totally relaxed in the plane, and even if you have no fear of flight, when
There
you
is
move
that,
up
yeah.
and you move down, you feel the levels of fear coming
Yeah.
up and down. It's just there.
But
It's part of our togetherness, of what's happening in that moment.
And that is a key point, that there is this kind of creation of the separate self that comes with fear. So it's my fear, it's my private fear, and that makes it so much worse. And what I found when I was in the anxiety at one stage, because I was investigating non-conventional terrorism, so every city was a target, but I had to get to work and go into the city, which could be attacked at any moment. This was at the most anxious stage. And then at a certain stage, there was a flip over that somebody, my friend Yvette, who I love so much, was waiting for me in the city with her 4 children. And there was this flip over that if she can die, if she's under this threat, then I can be there with her. The fear was gone. The fear was gone because of the compassion to be there together with her. Because, so what happens to the body then? It's no longer identified as my private, lonely fear. There's an expansion. If there's an expansion, the nervous system is much more free to release its voltage. Yeah. And that energy can become action, like with the animals of Peter Levine.
Yes.
To lift the car off and to get the people out and to save the world. It's energy that's available for rescue.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is that there's an appropriateness of the body and the cells in the body, rather than a contraction, which is, again, from your personal history.
Yeah.
I know you pick up fear from other people, don't you? I certainly do. It's not always just me, I feel.
Yeah,
I feel it from other people, and you feel it.
when you have anxiety, I feel it.
Yeah.
I feel it in my body, and I feel it's not comfortable for you. And then I run and try to find the right homeopathic remedy to give him to calm him down. Try to help him. When you're right, completely forgetting myself or whatever, then it's just.
Yeah.
But the starting point is that you feel something that wasn't primarily historically yours.
No.
That's the interesting thing, and I think we all do that.
Yeah.
There was this. I had a meeting with my teacher. It was a few years ago, and I was so joyous when I came to this meeting. And 5 minutes into this meeting, I start crying, and I said, "Why am I crying now? I don't know. There is no reason why I'm crying now." And then, through becoming aware, it lifted, and then I talked, and then 5 minutes again, I'm crying. And then she said to me, "Renate, you're picking up my sadness. You need to learn to differentiate what's yours and what is not yours." So this is my question. Okay, we pick all the time things up, but we make it at mine's and yours.
Yeah.
Is that important that we do that?
At a certain point, it's important to differentiate.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, it's important to drop it, because the differentiation is not always totally true.
Yeah.
It's really the sadness of your teacher is as beautiful to experience as your own sadness.
Yeah.
There is such a beauty in it. And when we're able to move into this beauty, the beauty of it, that it can be shared, that it's together, we don't need to separate anymore. It's totally clear, because there is such a depth of connection with yourself that it's totally clear. that it's not only yours. And at the one moment, she really wants to say something, that it's not only yours, because, you know, we're all vibrating with each other. It is in a way shared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also the sadness of your teacher is not only hers.
Yeah.
It's the sadness maybe of another student, which is not only theirs, it's maybe the sadness of the student's mother.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the AIDS virus.
Yeah.
You know, where does it begin and where does it end, and who gets to say what belongs to who? This is
Yeah.
your anxiety, this is your despair, this is his dark night. You know, who gets to say that? It just is among us. You know,
What was
sometimes I
first,
have these feelings of totally random. I'm totally happy, everything's well in my life, and I can have the most incredible feeling of total existential despair. And I do nothing with it. 5 minutes later, it's completely gone again. It's like a black cloud passing through the basis of the body, and it's gone. It's like moving through the ecosphere of the earth. They didn't even bother giving a label to it. Often he's a psychologist, so often he says, you know, what are you angry about? It's like, I don't need to pin a story on it and say what it's about, even. I don't even know if it's mine or where it's from. It's just, you know, it's
just, sounds good. So for people watching this who are saying, well, this is all very well, but I've got my own fear, my story of fear and my anxiety, what's, if you like, their next step? We've given them maybe a feel that it's to do with their history, maybe something happened like with you many years ago, and that's produced a trauma that hasn't been released, and there's ways, maybe practical ways that could help release that. We've also learned that it's not always personal, the fear. We pick it up. It's in the ether, if you like. It can be with someone else. It can just almost be. I know there's certain places that you go where there's a lot of people being killed in the past, and you pick it up there. You can walk through a place and you feel fine, and then you think, what am I feeling? And it's not personal again. Yeah. So Bart, what kind of advice would you give people that kind of recognize they have a deep fear or depression, and that is really affecting their lives?
Yeah.
What would you say they can do about that practically?
So practically, the first thing is that we don't want to have it. And it's horrible, we don't want to have it, but it is there. And we're helpless in it. So it's much more easy to move through it if we allow it, if the fight is gone, that we don't want to have it, or sometimes the fear for the fear. So what's helpful in that, in a way, and this is not my own idea, this is basically the idea of the Dalai Lama, he brought it forward, is to think of another person who's really suffering the same thing you're suffering, and suffer it for both of you, at least for 5 minutes. Give yourself 5 minutes to go to the depth of it for both of you, with a little prayer that it will help both of you to free yourself. You know, fear is moving through us as part of life. And I think part of life is transformation, the process of transformation. And so fear will transform itself into freedom. It moves into liberation, as anger will transform itself in forgiveness in a very natural way. We are transformers as well. And to give the whole system, our body, even if it's only for 5 minutes, the opportunity to be of service, to transform something, makes a lot of difference if you understand that what we're moving through as difficulties, as emotions, as pain, as suffering, as loneliness, is also a service. You don't do it for yourself. It's also a service to the whole.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything else, Georgie?
So, firstly, to take any self-judgment out of it. Really no judgment about being fearful, saying anything about the person in anxiety or in fear, because that really isolates more, and it really doesn't say anything about the person, except maybe that they're very sensitive, quite psychic and quite sensitive, because that's the other side of fear, this sensitivity. The second thing which can really help is to breathe in the fear, just breathe in completely as it is, the fear, to an infinity inside, and to breathe back peace. Whatever peacefulness. So whatever is in this world of duality, of happening, and fearful and nervous system, whatever the contraction is, just to gently breathe it in, and to gently breathe back peace, not our own peace, the peace from the other side. This combination can really help in the midst of a panic to come down back into the body and deeper into the body. And the body is safe. It's as safe as anything.
It's our anchor.
It's a slowed down energy, especially for us, to rest in.
Okay. Anything you want to say?
No. I think we need to finish.
It's a good idea.
Well, thank you, Georgie. Thank you, Bart. I just showed Georgie's book. Again, it's I Am Here, very beautiful book, opening the windows of life and beauty. And also Bart has a book, The 7 Steps, The Gift, 7 Steps to Happy and a Fulfilled Life. And Bart is also, you are a partner in a healing school in Holland. And they both do healing seminars there, if you're interested. And I will see you again soon. Goodbye.
Might see me again too.
Yes.
Who knows?